Now I have started recording, and I would like to start by responding to Abhinandan's generic question yesterday. So what is going to be the evaluation strategy? So let me that. I will share the screen and show you the Word file. Okay, so I'm ready. So do you see a Word file on your screen?
Yeah.
Sir.
It might take a few seconds with a slightly slower line, but once you see a Word file, then I can start talking about it. Is this visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So this time we don't have a mid-sem exam. That I think you already know. And the weightage for the final exam can be as low as 40%. Earlier, the rule was that final exam has to be at least 50%, but now it has been slightly reduced because of this pandemic situation. Whether physical exams will be possible or not, we are not sure yet. So the final exam I have kept at 40%. That's at the bottom here, 40 marks, if you can see this. The other 60% I have distributed in 3 components. One component is each of you will have to write a report on one of the commodities that is traded in the exchange. So we will go. We are actually going through a list of commodities that are available for trading. We will continue that discussion today. So what I will do is I will prepare a long list once I know how many students are taking this as credit. So that many items, and then you will have to pick without any overlap. So everybody has to be one unique item. And I have written down 4 pointers on what the report should constitute. Can you all read this?
Yes, sir.
Can you all read this one? The
Yes,
first item.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
nature of the commodity, type of contracts, market size, and also how the contracts are priced. So there are many pricing models, and for different contract, different commodities, different pricing models may be popular. So that you have to summarize and finally also give your comments. There is a word limit. There is a word limit, so it has to be between 2000 and 3000 words. So this is the first component. The second component is research reading. So research reading is you have to select a relatively recent paper on a relevant topic. Usually papers are available in a large number on arXiv or in Science Direct, or there are many other repositories which has recent papers. You have to prepare a summary report between 500 and 1000 words along with your comments. So the summary is not just a summary, it is a summary along with some comments. How do you think the model has worked, pros and cons, etc. Is that clear? Is the second component clear?
Yes.
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Hello?
Yes. Is the second component of evaluation clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Great. And the third component is the conventional one. So basically, we will give you a set of problems and you will have to solve those problems and submit as an assignment. It will be a group assignment. Probably I will do it in 2 installments, depending on how many students we have and how many groups we make. And that will also carry 20 marks. So that's the evaluation plan for this semester.
This will be a computer assignment, this third one.
The third one will be algebraic assignment. So you have to do pen and paper, then scan and send me.
Okay.
So as I said, so in this semester, there is very little in terms of data work, either simulation or statistics. This semester is mostly mathematical models. So your assignments will also be mostly pen and paper type.
Okay.
Of course, the research report and the commodity report, you don't need to write by hand. You will, of course, send me a PDF or Word file or whatever. Problem solving assignment, you'll have to do pen and paper and then scan it. All right, this is clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. Okay, so that's the evaluation plan. I will also upload that in the classroom, so we will have it for ready reference. And now let me continue with whatever we were discussing on Monday. There is a chat. Okay, yeah, Shushmit, thank you. I was thinking about that. So, great. Okay, so let us continue the discussion from last class. So I will share the screen again so that you can all see whatever is on my screen here. So let me now start talking about the course proper, and we will of course digress to other things like websites or some other links as we go along. But let me start with the main sequence. So as I said, yes, on Monday that we will be studying 2 types of models. In quantitative finance, we have either discrete time models or continuous time models. And of course, when you do statistical work, even if it's a continuous time model, you again make a discrete time approximation of that for the calibration part. But we'll come to that gradually. So are there any questions regarding Monday's discussion? I have not taught anything really, but if there are any queries at this point, you can just ask me or put up a chat, whatever you want. So, okay, so I don't see any chat here. So I guess I can continue. Okay. So there are 3 prerequisites for this course, primary, and these prerequisites are pretty elementary. You all have done a lot of this thing. I need you to know linear algebra and at least a little bit of linear programming. I know that linear programming is not a very exciting topic for most of our students, but I'm going to use some of those results. So linear programming will be required. If you want to brush up, then start doing so now. there are nice textbooks, so it should not take you long. I will be using calculus, of course, because for the continuous time models, we will be talking about differential equations and we will find solutions through integration. Of course, we will define the integration tool for uncertain variables. That is yet to come, but the prerequisite is that you are generally comfortable with the integration techniques. And I think that's a trivial requirement. The third requirement is probability and stochastic process. So again, all of you know about these things, I'm sure, from your 4 years of statistics training. In particular, I am very interested that you should brush up on branching process and anything related to the binomial tree, because binomial tree is the main toolbox for discrete time models. In all the financial discrete time models, binomial tree is the main toolbox. Okay, so is this fine? Can some people respond?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
right. So these are the things. So I'm sure the requirements are very mild, but if you want to brush up, then do start before we get into the formal models.
Sir,
Yes,
will you send us these notes after the?
these notes are already with you.
Okay. So
These notes
These
are
are in the drives.
they are
Okay,
already in
okay.
the they are already in the drive, Google Drive,
okay.
the classroom Google Drive that I created. That was Shubhrajyoti, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you helped me set it up. So you are asking me this question now.
I didn't look at.
Oh, so in other words, you didn't trust me in being able to do it. Is that it?
Sir, no.
No, but I'm learning. I'm learning slowly, right? I have to adapt to the new technology. No, anyway, jokes apart, I'm going to keep all the relevant stuff in the Google Drive and I will keep adding to it as we go along. And if there are some small comments or small details like the evaluation plan, that I will put up in the comment section in the Google Classroom. So keep checking these two. Whatever is relevant should be already there. If it is not there, just tell me, I will upload them. Like the evaluation plan, I will do it after the class today. Okay, so now let me scroll down a little bit and talk about what are the financial assets that we are going to talk about. Of course, stocks, which are the perennial favorites. Stocks are basically fractional ownership in a company. So whenever there is a company becomes reasonably large, typically what happens is the owners of the company are unable to meet all the financial requirements to make all the new investments in new projects, new machinery, new technology, right? So a lot of money is required. So what happens is these companies, they go public. So the process is called going public. What does it do? The company essentially sells a fraction. There is an echo. Why is there an echo? Yeah, now it's okay. Yeah. So the company sells a fraction of its ownership to the public in general through the stock exchange. When a company does it for the first time, it is called initial public offering. This process is called initial public offering. Once the company has made the offering, interested parties will submit applications to buy those shares, and at the end of the application period, shares will be allotted at the market-driven price. I say market-driven price because if there is a lot of demand, price will be higher. If there is less demand, price will be lower. So it is always this basic economic tenet that works. If you can see this small diagram at the bottom of the page now, where I have দেখতে পাচ্ছ না, okay, so should I
আপনি শেয়ার স্ক্রিনটা অফ করে দিয়ে আবার শেয়ার করুন।
শেয়ার অফ করে আবার শেয়ার করব। আচ্ছা, স্টপ শেয়ার। There are some chats. Oh, are you sharing something? Oh, Srijit, acha, you have been writing. Okay. I missed that somehow. Okay. So let me share again. So is it working now? Srijit, can you confirm whether you can see? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, good, thank you. All right, so look at this picture. This is a generic picture that appears in all microeconomics textbooks. This is called the demand and supply equilibrium. So what are the axes? The x-axis is the quantity and the y-axis is the price. So what happens is, if I go to the market and I find that today the price of fish is very high, then I will either buy less of it or just not buy and go back tomorrow. So if price goes up, usually the demand for a commodity goes down. So that's why the DD curve here is downward sloping. On the other hand, think of it from the perspective of the sellers. The sellers would always prefer a higher price. So if a higher price is being offered in the market, they would want to bring more of their products into the market, because each unit they can sell, they get more profit. Their production cost is the same. So if the price increases, their profit per unit increases. So typically the supply curve, the S curve in this diagram, will be positively sloped. And how do we know where the price will converge in the market? In a very simple setting, the right price will be where the demand and the supply coincides. So at a particular price where the amount of supply that is being brought to the market equals how much the people want it. So this is the demand supply equilibrium. Of course, it's a very static snapshot type of picture. In reality, this is more dynamic in nature. And of course, you have to also consider that we typically do not look at one commodity separately. When we go to the market, we buy fish as well as vegetables and pulses and rice and many other things. So it is slightly more complicated, but the basic message is that typically the demand curves, the demand schedule is decreasing with price and the supply schedule is increasing with price. And this is exactly what drives the stock market. Every minute, whenever there are new buy orders that come to the market, we have already talked about the order book last time on Monday. Every time demand comes in, the price will be typically driven down. And every time, more demand comes in, price will be driven up. And if there is excess supply, more people wants to sell, then the price will be driven down. So this starts happening from day one when the company goes public. It makes the initial public offer, and then the shares are available for retrading. So once you buy a share, that is not the end of the matter. Later on, you may decide to sell it off. So you can go to the market after 1 month and sell it. Or somebody who has not bought the share on day one may later on decide to buy, and then they can go to the market and again place an order. The order will go to the order book. Whenever shares are available, that person will get shares. But now these shares are basically old shares. So new shares are brought to the market only once during the initial public offering, and then the same shares are repeatedly bought and sold. And because of this repeated buying and selling, the price of the stock keeps changing all the time. Even though the firm itself may not change in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, its price in the stock market can change every second. Okay. So what are the other assets that we are usually interested in?
Sir,
Yes.
so after the company makes the initial public offering, after that, when the initial shares are sold, the company never gets any other money from this.
Okay. So the company can make more money from this if they want. It happens in two possible ways. One possible way is that the company can sometimes introduce more shares. They can make a second bulk offering in the market. So basically, suppose initially the owners of the company sells shares for 40% of the ownership. The 60% ownership they keep with themselves. So this 40% is now represented by a number of shares, maybe 4,000 shares in the stock market. People keep buying and selling on those 4,000 shares. Later on, if the company needs a lot more money, they can decide that, okay, we will sell off another 10% of the company. So this new 10% comes in as new 1,000 shares in the stock market. So these are called fresh offerings. So fresh offerings are possible, which means the ownership of the company gets more distributed with the public.
When there are fresh offerings, then there are new parts of the ownership that are being offered.
Yes.
What I am asking is that the company does not profit from any recurrent trade that happens after the ownership is sold off.
Not directly, not directly. There are some indirect benefits in the sense that the company will always get more loans from the market if their stock price is moving up. So if my stock price is doing very well in the exchange, it will be much easier for me to go to a bank and get more loans. So that actually brings me to my other financial asset, which is written here under stocks. So if you can see that, these are called bonds. So stocks or share, these are part ownership of a company. So you are owning part of the company, and if the company is doing well, you will also get a better value in the long run. And even in the short run, because of buying and selling, the stock price may fluctuate. Bonds is the other side of the story. Bonds are not ownership. Bonds are essentially loans. So a company can go to a bank, take a loan of 1 crore rupees, and in return, they give them a certificate that I pledge to return 10% interest and the principal after 1 year. So I take 1 crore from the bank, and after a year, I will return 1.1 crore. So this pledge or this contract is called a bond. So in financial market language, we say that the bank is buying the bond from the company. So bank is buying the bond. In return, the bank is giving the price of the bond, which is nothing but the loan to the company. So the money goes to the company from the bank, and the bond certificate comes from the company to the bank. Okay, is that?
This is different from the normal interest rate that is like of the loan.
Yes. So the interest rate that you will get if you take a loan from the bank is decided by the bank. Because you as an individual person do not have that much of market power to negotiate with the bank for the interest rate. So whatever the bank is advertising, you have to take it. But when a company goes to the bank for a loan, or actually what happens is the company does not go to one bank. The company says that we are going to sell bonds for 1 crore rupees and the return on the bond is this much, let's say 10%. Then the banks actually comes in and buys those bonds, or even individuals like you or me can also buy those bonds. So here, how much interest the bond will pay is actually decided by the company itself, not the other way around.
Okay.
So it's basically a matter of who has more negotiation power.
Right.
When a large company is selling a bond, it could be for large amount of money. So the company actually has the negotiation power to decide, okay, this is the interest rate I am going to offer. Of course, if you don't like it, you won't buy that bond, but someone else will buy. It is also available in the stock market, just like the stock, but it is not part ownership. So you are not owning a part of the company. All you are doing is you are giving a loan to the company, and the company will give you a fixed return. So that is the main difference between stocks and bonds. Stocks are part ownership of firms. Bonds are not ownership, it's a loan obligation.
Okay, okay.
All right.
Another question, like the question Abhinandan asked, is that when the company make it public their shares, okay. So how essentially, so just like suppose there is a bank and so there is a company who asks the public to invest in mutual funds. So I personally, I may be wrong that they get the money from the public and they also invest somewhere, and then they get some money back and then distribute it as some percentage to the public, right? Hello.
What do you mean by distribute to the public? How?
I mean the profit.
You mean in terms of dividends?
In terms of dividends, yeah.
Right. So we will come to that point. So what happens is, when a company is doing very well, which is making a large profit, sometimes the company awards a prize to the shareholders. Shareholders are also part owners of the company. So the company says that, okay, we have done well last financial year. Maybe we have made 5% extra profit. So what we will do is we will distribute 3% of that profit among all the shareholders proportionately. Proportionately means in terms of how many shares they own.
Okay.
So that is called a dividend. Some people like dividends, some people don't like dividend. Why? Dividends are obviously you get some money from the company. So it's like some additional cash, you can go to Europe for a holiday. So some people like it. But it is also money taken out of the company's investment portfolio. You see, if the company did not give you the dividend, the company would have all this cash in hand and can invest in new technology or hire some more people from ISI, and in general, in the long term, increase their value, right? Because if you have cash in hand, you will invest it. You will not, of course, keep it in the bank. So a dividend is also a foregone investment. Instead of investing it, I give it back to the shareholders. So some shareholders like those.
Paying dividends makes their shares more lucrative, that they are more prone to give dividends. So that market perception increases.
It's the other way around. Whenever there is a dividend announcement, actually the share price goes down. For the simple reason that people will think that, okay, the dividend coming out of the company's assets means they have less investment fund.
I didn't get that. If I am paying dividends, then
As
I
I said,
have more investments.
so dividend is good in the short run. You get some immediate cash, but it is bad in the long run. Because if I did not get dividend today, the money gets reinvested by the company, then tomorrow the share price will grow up faster. Because the company is bigger, the company has better technology, better human resource, etc. So dividend is actually a trade-off between tomorrow's share price and today's immediate cash. So it's immediate cash versus tomorrow's share price.
I did not get the fact that why the share price would go down if I paid it, if the company pays
Correct.
it.
Why the share price will go down? So if I know that the company is not investing as much as possible, rather than it is giving money out, where is the money coming from? The dividend money is actually coming out of the total value of the company. Correct? The company represents a total value, and the profit is also part of that value as of now. So if I take out a part of that value and give it back to the shareholders in cash, I will not be able to use it again. So the total value at the disposal of the company actually shrinks,
Okay.
and the share price is nothing but a fraction of the total value.
Okay, I get that. I get that. So then why would a company give dividends at all?
Okay, so as I said, there are some shareholders who likes dividends. So basically what the company does is they have sequential meetings. They are called general body meetings, etc. So in those meetings, the companies usually decide how much dividend to pay out. Because dividend also acts as an advertisement. You see, even though I am actually giving up on some investment opportunity, investment fund, dividend is also an advertisement to the shareholders that, see, we are looking after you. Because you have invested in my company in the past, I am now giving you some cash so that you can take a holiday or you can buy a new television or whatever.
Right. This was the thing I was talking about. So this effect is not that large to drive the stock prices up.
Usually this effect is smaller than the value effect.
That's
This effect is usually smaller than the value effect. So whenever there is a dividend announcement, you will see the stock price will go down. Empirically. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll talk about this more in detail because we have not yet talked about the formal accounting models at all. But we'll come.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, a stock will add to the profit of a company, but how will bonds help a company? Because
How
both
will-
are considered to be assets.
Your first statement is wrong. Stocks do not add to the profit of the company. Stocks are part ownership that I sell off to get funds.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, it is helping the company.
It is helping the company to invest, to get bigger projects and then add value.
Yeah.
So same is true for bonds. Bond is also getting a loan, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
See, there are two ways the company can get money. One is I give up part of my ownership, which means I am selling shares. The second option is I don't want to give up any more ownership, but I still need money for investment. Then I will sell bonds.
Okay. Okay. Sir.
So it is always true that a company in need of new funds will first need to decide which route I am going to take. Am I going to sell more shares or should I float some bonds and get loans?
But sir, in the bond case, they have to bear interest over the money they are getting as loan. So
So
that will face the less profit.
in finance, the most important principle is there is no free lunch. So if you want something, you have to give up something in return. So if you are willing to let go of some ownership, then you can get money from the shareholders. But if you don't want to let go of ownership, there has to be some cost that you have to bear, correct? Because you are taking some loan.
Okay.
So there is no free lunch. That is actually a financial principle and we will formalize it later on. So we are going to convert it to a mathematical statement. We will get there. Okay, so I have already shown you the order book pictures, how the demand supply pressure plays out in the market. On Monday, we have seen that. So we can move ahead unless.
So, sir, in that previous one,
Yeah.
is there any cases where a company could decide particularly which route to choose? Like any particular scenario which comes to mind where they actually chose this because of this?
Yes, there are theoretical models for this. There are both theoretical models as well as empirical analysis of how much should I get from share selling and how much should I get from floating bonds. Unfortunately, we will not get into that literature in this course because that literature will take us more into a game theoretic setup, which I am not going to cover in this course. But if you are interested, you should look up. Okay, so let me Where is the chat? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to write the name of a book here in the chat. Can you all see the name of this book? This is by two persons, Brille and Myers, and it's called Introduction to Corporate Finance or something like that. It's again one of the most popular textbooks on corporate finance in the market. So if you really want to read up this trade-off decision, all the strategic nuances, then this book is the best starting point. All right, so let me come back to my notes. So I have already, yeah. Yes, is there a question?
Yes. So in any kind of loan, you have some kind of mortgage. So when a company is selling these bonds, what is the kind of mortgage that is having?
Right. So whenever you are selling a bond, it comes with a pledge, with a guarantee. The guarantee says that if the company is unable to pay back the principal and the interest, the stock market can step in, sell off company's assets to realize that money and give it back to the investors.
Okay,
That's why
but
there's a formal market for this.
when this company actually cannot pay back the money, then it means the company is going to be bankrupt or something. So the share prices will automatically come down, and
Yes, yes.
possibly
Okay.
that money will not be
Okay,
realized.
okay. So let me answer this question, even though it's going to take some time, but yeah, this is a very good question. Even though I should refer you to the Brille Myers book at this point, but let me answer this anyway, because this is something that needs to be talked about. See, I did not tell you the whole story of the difference between stocks and bonds. Whenever you are selling shares, the investors, the shareholders, they become part of the company ownership. Any shareholder is also an owner, maybe of a very small fraction, but an owner. So if the company makes a loss, the shareholder also makes a loss. If the company gets a profit, the shareholder gets a proportional profit out of that. So for the shareholder, there is both an upside and a downside. But if the company has sold a bond to you, you have bought a bond, which means you have given a loan to the company, then you are not an owner. So you are not going to take any risk. The company has guaranteed a fixed rate of return. In the good day, if the company makes a 15% profit, the shareholders will get 15%, but the bondholder will get the fixed 10%, whatever was agreed upon earlier. In a bad day, if the company's project fails, the company makes a loss of 7%, the bondholder will still demand his 10% profit, 10% return. So what will happen is the company will have to sell off some of its assets, something else, so that the bondholders can be paid back the 10%. So what will happen to the shareholders? The shareholders will actually make a loss of more than 7%. Because 7% was the original loss. On top of that, there will be the bond obligation which has to be met. So in financial language, this is called, the shareholders are the residual claimants. Okay, so the term is residual claimants. So if the company makes a loss, but they still have to pay back the bondholders. The bondholders will still demand their 10%. So the shareholders will get even less.
So the question, I think what he was asking is that, so if a company is on the verge of getting bankrupt and it decides to sell
Right.
its assets,
So that's
just to pay,
that's the extension of the story. So what will happen if the company has done very badly? So that bondholders come in and they find that there is not enough asset in the company to get their principal plus 10%. So even the bondholders are not going to get their full 10%. That is when we say that the company is going bankrupt. The company will then actually file an application for dissolution. So everything of the company will be sold off, and whatever money is obtained from that sale, first the bondholders will be paid. If they can be paid in full, then the remaining money will be distributed among the shareholders proportionately. If even the bondholders cannot be paid in full, the shareholders get nothing. Have I answered the question? Hello?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And actually, I missed one question from Srijit. So should I answer that question, Srijit?
Surely.
Maybe after the class.
Sure.
Okay. So order book we have seen. So you know how the demand supply plays out. So let me move ahead then. So if I scroll down, the model for any financial asset price is essentially a stochastic process. So what we are looking at is a time-dependent random variable. Why is it a random variable? Because a company is always investing in new projects. Some of these projects may result in a very good profit, but they may also result in losses. So the way we model it is in the traditional stochastic process style. We say that there are alternative states of nature which will be realized tomorrow. I know what are the possible states of nature, so I can actually enumerate the whole sample space. I can also assign probabilities to each of the states of nature, each of the possible outcomes. So whatever I do today is facing that uncertainty tomorrow. Tomorrow, one of these possible states of nature will be realized. Today, I only know the probability distribution, the probability information about it. So whatever investment decision I have to take, I have to do it based on that. So that is the canonical representation of the financial asset pricing in simple terms. So is that clear?
Yes,
Is this
sir.
clear?
Yes, sir.
What happened? What have I done? Okay. So basically a little bit more on the bank, on the bonds. So the bonds are, in summary, bonds are loan contracts. This is just written here. So you may just like to read it. And if something is unclear, you can ask me. So what we assume is that all the loan contracts have zero uncertainty. In particular, a bank will give you a guaranteed rate of return, which is called the interest rate. Or if you take a loan, the bank will ask for a fixed rate of return, and these returns are deterministic. So there is zero variance in the bank return. So obviously, if you want to play it very safe, you will always go to the bank. After the bank comes the bonds. The bonds typically offer a guaranteed rate of return, which is also fixed. But you have to remember that if the company does very badly, there is a small chance that you may not be able to get what you are guaranteed. It's like in the extreme case of the bankruptcy situation, you will get less. So bonds are relatively more risky than bank. And there is a formal way of evaluating the riskiness of a bond. So whenever bonds are issued by a company, before the formal issue, there is an exercise called a credit rating exercise. So the company pays a credit rating agency like CRISIL. CRISIL is one of the big credit rating companies, and ask them that, okay, you give us a grade. So it is like sitting for an exam. So CRISIL will come to the company, they will check all the papers, all the project opportunities, their technology, etc., and give them a grade. So the grade is just like a grade that you get in the exams, like A+, A minus, like that. Now, this grade is nothing but an indicator of the probability of default. The probability of this extreme bad situation where the company will be unable to pay back on the loan. Higher grade means the probability is smaller. So even though bonds are considered to be fixed return contracts, they are not absolutely riskless. There is a little bit of risk involved, and that risk is in the probability of default. But of course, it is much less risky than shares. Okay. So in the financial investment hierarchy, the bank is usually the safest, then comes the bonds, and then comes the shares, because shares are full responsibility. All the profit, all the losses of the company will get reflected in your return. Okay. So we have basically a hierarchy of financial assets: zero variance bank, very small variance bond, and full variance shares. Okay. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, because human beings are so complicated, we are not satisfied with only these three possibilities. What we do is we try to write very complicated combinations of all these possibilities, and then try to find the correct price of these combinations, for which this quantitative finance course is being taught. And these type of arrangements are called derivative contracts. So on Monday, we were talking about this, that what is actually a derivative. A derivative is nothing but an arrangement or a contract where all these things can be mixed, or maybe we take only one of them, but we put up additional constraints, additional restrictions on the payoff of that arrangement. So it's a contract whose payoff arrangement can be very complicated, can be customized in many ways. All these contracts together are called derivative contracts. On Monday, we were looking at options, and somebody mentioned European option. So these options are one kind of derivative contracts. So what I will do is I will now quickly go through an overview of these contracts from some slides, which I'm going to open here. Again, the slides are in the Google Drive, so you can also open it if you want.
So contracts, so the derivatives are made with an idea of maximizing the profit rate of the company.
Not necessarily.
Okay, then
there are two possible motives. For any financial transaction, there are two possible motives. One is you want to maximize your return or maximize profit if you want. The other is minimize your risk.
Okay.
So in terms of, so in your language, I may want to maximize mu, or I may want to minimize sigma. Or I may do a combination of these two things. Because as I said, the primary principle in finance is there is no free lunch. So if you want a larger mu, you have to accept a larger sigma. So you can buy stock. The stock gives you the highest possible return if the company is doing well, but it also gives you the worst possible outcome if the company is doing badly.
Okay.
Okay, good. So let me now open that. Yes.
So bank returns have zero variance. So what if the bank goes bankrupt?
Okay, so good. So you have done your homework. So what is that thing called? Do you also know the name when a bank goes bankrupt?
Insolvent. Insolvency.
No. Insolvency is bankruptcy. When a bank goes bankrupt, it is called bank run.
Okay.
Did you not know this name, bank run?
No, sir.
Okay, so how can a bank run happen? That story we can take up on Monday. So remind me that I will talk a little bit about bank runs, okay? Because if I go on telling stories, then I will never get done with my syllabus.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, but remind me.
Yeah.
These are interesting questions. I like it, but well, this is also an optimization with some constraints. All right, so let me now open the slides and at least start the discussion. Maybe we'll have to continue next week, but we can at least talk about for 10-15 more minutes. This week there are no other classes, right? Are there any classes this week?
No, sir.
So
I can continue a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure.
yes, yes.
Okay, so I will come back to these pictures again later on, but let me just quickly show you what are the different possible derivative contracts that are readily available in the market. These are call options. We will describe call options, but in short, a call option has no downside risk, but if the share price increases, the call option buyer will get the full advantage of it. So a call option typically looks like this. So if the share price is below 100, there is no risk for the option holder. But if the share price increases above 100, the option holder gets full benefit. We'll see how the contract is written, but let me not spend too much time on that. Short call, this is the put contract, is the reverse of a call option, where the downside, when the stock price is very low, then you make a profit. If the stock price is very high, then there is no obligation. These are the different possible payoffs from options, calls and puts. And you can see that basically options are not really for profit maximization. Options really are for risk minimization. So what I want to avoid is losses. When the share does well, I get the same profit as the shareholder. But when the share is doing badly, I can avoid making the loss. That is all that the option will do. There are many.
Go back to the second slide once.
This one?
Yeah, okay, fine.
No, I skipped some of them because I will come back to them after I have defined the contracts formally.
Okay, fine. ठीक है.
What I really wanted to show you was this slide where the different payoff graphs are shown.
I mean, these are zero or what? Or negative are there?
Not exactly zero, slightly negative, but we'll talk about it. We'll come back. We'll come back to this. So now let me actually go to the issue that I wanted to discuss today, because there are many different things that we will talk about throughout the term, and they are all summarized here. So this summary I will use again and again. But what I want to talk about today is the other kinds of assets which are traded in the financial market. So in broad terms, I'm going to talk about energy and commodity derivatives. Just a description, no details, no models, just possibly the names. So are you all with me on this slide?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So first of all comes the agricultural commodities. The agricultural commodities are also traded on the stock exchange, and For them, the exchange is called the commodity exchange. So if I want to talk about where these exchanges are, then I will simply go to this other link here. So I am now opening the page of one of the bigger commodity exchanges, which is the National Commodity Exchange, NCDEC. If you can see my screen here, you will see that the NCDEC is loading. Can you all see the NCDEC homepage?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me scroll down a little bit. So this is the index. This is the index page where it is currently showing the rainfall indices, because that is an important input for commodity production. And on the right, we can see the different important commodities that are now making gains. So it is showing top gainers, top losers. So right now, turmeric and cottonseed and chana, these things are making profits. So all of these things are traded in a formal exchange, which is called the commodity exchange. And who are making losses? Top losers: soybean, mustard seed, guar. So you see a lot of the major commodities that are produced in our agricultural sector are also formally traded in the exchange. So it is not like you just go to a mandi and buy things in bulk and then bring it to the city and sell it off in retail. There is also a formal exchange market structure where all this kind of trading can happen. Of course, in very large quantities, but it happens.
I mean, using this, can the corresponding those who sell these things, can they like change their business policies according to the season based on these ideas?
Yes, they do. Certainly.
In a business.
Certainly they do.
Okay.
We will talk about that, how these things are used. See, I have not yet talked about the contract specifications. I am just showing you the names of the items. Later on, we will also discuss the contract specifications. Once we get there, we will immediately understand how that can be used in deciding how your business will be done.
But how are these different from the stock exchanges?
Okay, in the stock exchange, in the end, there is only a contract, a piece of paper. But in the commodity exchange, in the end, if you want, you can also take physical delivery. So if you are buying a contract for 1 quintal of cottonseed, you can either take the cash back at the end, depending on the price, or you can actually take physical delivery of the cottonseed.
And all these commodities are controlled by the government.
All this trading is controlled by the government. The government is represented here by the stock exchange. See, NCDEC, the symbol that you see on the top left corner here, NCDEC is a segment of the National Stock Exchange.
Okay, another thing, like, I mean, this makes much more sense if we do it on much a local level. So is there a local level like idea of how it's changing?
Yes. So if you want to get into those details, what you can do is you can go to the market data segment here. Okay. In the market data segment, you will not only get overall prices, you will also get prices from every major marketplace where these commodities are bought and sold.
Okay.
So for instance, if you are talking about potato, potato is not listed in the stock exchange, by the way, just taking an example. Let's say soybean. Okay.
Okay.
If you are looking at soybean, then you will see some market in Pune, some market in Tamil Nadu, and some market in Madhya Pradesh. These are the major markets.
Okay, okay.
So separately, you can see the prices in different places. Of
I
course,
mean,
it is not that local like in every district. These are major markets.
okay, okay. Suppose I am a vegetable seller, or I am in I'm soybean seller in Kolkata, in my place Thakuria Bazaar. So how can I like use this data to make my business grow large or something like that? I'm just taking an example.
Yes. Yes. As a vegetable seller, if you are big enough, you see, you have to be big enough because you can only buy in large quantities from these markets. Small quantities. No. I don't mean wholesale. It's like really large quantities.
Okay, okay.
So if you are that big, you can actually buy suitable contracts in these markets so that even if later on the prices go up by a lot, you will still be able to buy these things at a pre-contracted low price.
Okay, okay. Nice.
So these markets are actually also used for physical delivery, where people are going to take delivery of these commodities and then sell them off somewhere else.
Okay. Suppose Big Basket is maybe using this, I'm just assuming.
No, you don't have to assume. Big Basket is certainly using these contracts.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so I'm not going there, but you can see on my screen now that for the commodity market, I have got two examples. One is the NCDEC, which I have just showed you, and the other one is the MCX, Multi-Commodity Exchange. There is the second link. So later on, you should also scroll to MCX website and see what are the items listed there, what kind of information you can get. It is absolutely necessary that you visit these web pages, because at some point of time we will stop talking about the stories and background and we will basically talk about formal models. So at that point it will become a very pen and paper course. But we must remember that whatever models we are setting up or solving or finding prices, they have a physical counterpart. And the physical counterpart can be as physical as mustard seed. So it is always good to remember and have that reality check. So you should be looking at these exchange home pages, find out what are the things that happen, how it happens, and there are a lot of documentation also. It is very easy to read up those documentations in non-technical terms and find out how the trades happen. And it is actually important to know this thing, because going forward, if you are going to take up a career in finance, be it in the industry or academia, you are going to develop models for new things or new models for existing things. In either case, you will have to know about the physical characteristics of the item that you are modeling. So you cannot just start from an arbitrary stochastic process. The stochastic process has to be grounded in the commodity you are trying to study. It could be something as mundane as guar gum or mushur dal or mustard seed or coffee. Okay, so now let me move to the next item, which is the energy market. And for energy market, I am going to show you some other page, not an Indian page, but this page I like a lot because it's extremely informative. This is called the Nord Pool. Nord Pool is basically a consortium of the Nordic countries who trade a lot in energy. And energy means many different things. So this is the Nord Pool page. And this particular price page is for the wind energy. So wind energy is actually traded. So the energy is here priced in terms of euro per megawatt hour. So if you can see my screen, you can see here that this is the This is the pricing unit, euro per megawatt hour. And for every day, for different segments, the prices are given here. And some of these segments are named after places, so you can also understand which countries we are talking about. So there is Oslo, there is Bergen. If you know that these are prominent cities in that area. So this is the wind energy page. So similarly, there are other energy markets. So I will also open, I hope I have it here. Yeah, I also open the Indian page, which is not so well developed because it's a very new thing in the Indian context.
I mean, essentially, a government can or any company can get profit out of this if they use their geographical knowledge to the best and use proper energy. I mean, okay.
Exactly. So think of the airline industry. The airline industry uses a lot of energy, right? So they trade a lot in the energy market.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the Indian Energy Exchange. So now this page that I have opened just now is the Indian Energy Exchange, which is a very new thing, started only in 2017, I think, 3 years back. So that's why I showed you Nord Pool first, because Nord Pool, if you browse, you will get a lot more information. It's much more developed. The Indian Energy Exchange is still baby, so the baby is just learning to walk. So this is a market snapshot, and navigation here is not so friendly. So you have to basically know exactly what you are looking for. So here also you have energy blocks. So here it is a date, hour, and time block given. And what are the bids and how much has been traded, that kind of information you can get. Can you all see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is another market where a lot of mathematical modeling happens. Because as you can see, this is intangible. So energy is very difficult to store. And there is no physical manifestation of it except through work done. You can understand energy only through work done. So such an intangible thing can also be traded, and hence the contracts has to be priced. And a lot of sophisticated maths goes in here. In fact, in recent years, a lot of financial math publications have focused on energy. First of all, because energy is a very important commodity now, and also because the challenges, the mathematical challenges are much, much more. All right. So I want
regarding energy part, that where it is like as you told in the agriculture index, there is a physical existence of the agricultural stuff. For companies, there is a physical existence of the company. What is the physical existence, like where is the physical existence of the energy, or how it is being, like how can I suppose I'm investing, so how can I know about the growth, like what is happening and stuff like that?
Growth you can work out from the growth of the industry that is using energy. How much energy is required?
Okay. I mean, can you give an example? I didn't get how, like.
Of course, yeah, surely. So, take the canonical example of Holland. Holland is the wizard of wind energy. They were the first country that actually created landmass from the sea, because Holland, a lot of the country is below sea level. Did you know that?
Yeah.
A large part of the country is actually below sea level. So they basically built dikes, which are like barriers to keep the water out.
Yeah.
And then dried out the land and actually made it arable. So now agriculture is happening on pieces of land which are actually below sea level. And they were also the pioneers in harvesting wind energy. So Holland has a lot of turbines. You know, those big fans that you see on movies,
Yeah.
in particular in Shah Rukh Khan movies. Those kind of things are also very popular in the Nordic countries because sunlight is scarce. You have to remember that for 6 months of the year, there is no sunlight in the Nordic countries, practically zero. So
Yeah.
they rely on the wind energy a lot. And because of the low population density, they have a lot of land. So they actually build up banks of wind turbines. And of course, the production and the use of this energy is not coincident. So you are not, plugging it in all the time in real time. So you really do want to distribute the power. So in some places, there might be more turbines, more energy is produced. So there is an excess supply. And in some other place, there might be an excess demand. So you want to transfer this energy. And of course, you have to do it in a very short time because as I said, it's very difficult to store. So you basically move it from high production areas to the high demand areas and people pay accordingly.
Okay.
So the trading happens in terms of hourly blocks. So if you look at the trading patterns, you will see that people buy for 2-hour blocks, 6-hour blocks like that. That for the next 2 hours, I'm going to get 1000 megawatt per hour from you at a fixed rate. And I can write this contract 3 months in advance. So whatever happens, you are bound to supply me that much of energy at that price.
Okay.
And you understand it can get really complicated because of various physical or natural phenomena. So pricing this kind of contracts is much more difficult than pricing a contract on a stock price.
Yes.
So if you start thinking about it, it's not very hard to understand why this kind of mathematical modeling is so challenging.
Okay.
And if you look at the energy requirement at the global level, how much energy we all use, even us individuals, how much energy we use. Right now, we are using a lot of energy. There are 30 odd people simultaneously logging on to the internet. So how much energy is that using? You can guess, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this is about. So this is a very big market. Of course, not for retail investors like us, but it's very high value. And for people like us, what are the opportunities? For people like us, the opportunities are in modeling. So if you can come up with a smart model for a new contract in the energy market, you can make a lot of money. Okay, so I guess it's a good point to stop. We will continue this discussion on Monday, but before that, I would again ask all of you to look at this website, browse through what are the commodities being traded, what are the items like energy, what are the energy items being traded, what is the volume of trade, how big are these markets. So these kind of things would be useful, not as a general knowledge, but to keep in mind when you are modeling something, because the modeling has to be, as I said, has to be grounded in the commodity or whatever item you are modeling, right? So that's why I want you to do this browsing. And well, I don't know whether you will find it so or not, but I find it great fun to look at these websites because I always learn new things. I have been studying this market for quite some time now, but every day I learn new things. Even when teaching you, I will be learning a lot of new things. Okay.
Sir, my freelance question.
Your freelance question.
Is there a subject with a free lunch?